Welcome.
Thanks, Randy. So just a little bit more on what I'm going to be talking about today. We're kind of going to be switching gears. So you all got a good taste of Siemens and TIA portal and kind of how to set up your system. So in this portion, I'm going to be going over how you can access this system remotely. So especially now that we are in the COVID times, you can't always be in your facility as often as you want. My presentation is going to show you how you can set up your system and have it be remotely accessible to you in another side of your plant from the comfort of your own home, things like that. So let me share my screen. All right. So for this presentation, actually, let me confirm. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
All right. So let me log off here so I can start from the very beginning. All right. So what I'm going to be talking about today is eCatcher. eCatcher is a software suite that is provided by HMS's E1 devices. And this is what will allow you to set up your E1 devices. I'm talking the E1 Flexi and Cozy units. Now, for this presentation, we are going over the software side, but we do have videos on our YouTube channel that's going over the hardware and how that functions. So in this case, we're just going over how to set it up and how to integrate it into your PLCs. So eCatcher is the software suite that allows us to download and create our devices, create user accounts, and this is what you would actually log into to remotely access your devices. So as you can see here, you do have to create an account, and how this works, that way everyone is kind of separated, is that you create an account based on your company. So in our case, our account name is under EandM. So when you create yours with admin rights and restrictions and other users, you would put your own company here. So to do that, you would just hit this create the free plus account. You'll see as I go along that this is a pretty intuitive software to use. If you do it a couple of times, you'll know how to do it later down the line. So one of the first things to note, like I mentioned before, you check the availability for your company name. So part of the reason with that is that maybe you have other branches of your company. You still want to have it under the same company umbrella name, and then the different users can kind of coincide with who you want to assign these job functions to. If you're creating a company for the first time under EandM, it will always be an admin account. And so you'll just put in all of your information there. And I don't really want to be redundant on this, but once you hit next, the following information is just dealing with your company addressing and things like that. So nothing too intense. So following that, let's go over how you actually use the structure on here. Okay. So for right now, I do have the admin account, and that's what I'm using. So upon logging in, this is what you're going to be interacting with. Again, this is from an admin perspective. So as an admin account, you have access to 3 separate pages: your E1 devices, the user pages, and your account settings. As a user, you will really only see the E1 page. And chances are, if you are acting as a maintenance person, an engineer, a manager, whatever it is, this is the page that you will interact with the most. This shows you all of the E1 devices that is registered under your account. So as you can see here, I have a couple of E1 cozies and flexi units scattered all around, and I'll go over each part separately on here. So one of the first things that you'll note when you look on your E1's page is the status of that device. Online, offline, that just signifies that the E1 device is up and running and you can connect to it. So as you can see here, this cozy demo labeled for San Francisco is online and I can connect to that, which we will do later down the line. If for whatever reasons I log into here and someone is already connected to this cozy unit, I can also see who's connected to it and if they're making any changes and what firmware they're running. We also have custom fields here that make it a little bit easier for you to see and differentiate between the devices. So I'm going to teach you later how to change that. But for my purposes, I put in the location, a sample customer, and the person in charge of this device, so that at a quick glance, I don't confuse this cozy from another unit listed on here. So you can change that as you see fit. One of the cool things about this E1 page is it lets you track who uses it, what time in a log function. So if I were to select a device that I want to see who's been using it and things like that, I can highlight it and click the logs. So under the logs, it shows you which user has essentially remoted into that device and accessed it in any way. So it'll show you what they were doing if they wanted to leave a message. So let me scroll down to some of the sample ones. So in these ones, I was performing some sample testing yesterday. So when I make changes on that E1 device and I log off, I can leave a little bit of a message for the next person, for the next maintenance person, the next operator that shows, hey, on October 6th, I flipped a bit on that PLC and then I logged off. And it makes it a lot easier for bookkeeping and tracking any changes that happen to your system. You can see here it also specifies which user did said task. So with this, if you want to have it for bookkeeping purposes and maintenance, you can also export this file, print it out for whatever reason. Another cool thing on here that makes it a little bit easier to kind of gauge the information of that device is you can also select the properties. Now the properties on here is essentially an expanded version of what you were seeing on the E1's page. So it shows you all the other pieces of information, the serial number of that device, your VPN tunnel, and if you want to make any changes on the LAN and the firewall. And if you'd also want to disable that device and things like that. For those of you that are concerned, just again, as another quick point to hear, I can make these changes because I am an admin account. If this is under a user, they are not able to change anything on here. They can just access it, disconnect, and reconnect. That's about it. But any changes that you make here, no one can make it unless you're an admin account. And then one of the things on here too is, let's say you do have branches all around the US, maybe even globally. If you want to have a quick glance and not in a list view, you can also set your viewing in a map version. So you can see here we have a couple of different sample devices in different areas on the West Coast. For our purposes, these are our actual locations to our branches. And you can see here that the green lighted one is the one that's plugged in and running. So that's the one that we will be remoting into in just a little bit. But at a quick glance, I kind of like the list format a little bit more. So I'd mentioned before that this is a relatively simple user interface. So to simply add a new device to your account, all you have to do is hit this plus button. One of the things here is that if you are using multiple devices across different facilities, you want to make sure that the name that you're classifying it under is something that's easily recognizable. So for my case, it's a little bit simple because these are all demo devices. But if let's say I have an E1 Cozy, and this is connected to a PLC and an IPC. So I have a camera that's accessing it. And then one of the custom fields that I have here is location. So I can classify which facility is in. I can also say assembly line 1. One of the things to note is that when you do create an E1 device, you have a couple of options for your connection type. Now, what this means is that, for example, if you have an E1 device that is connected via Wi-Fi, cellular, just connected to your network, and you want that connection to be always running. So what I mean by that is at any time of the day, if this device is plugged in, I can remote into it. So it'll have a permanent connection. That's what you would select. The other option that you have here is a triggered connection type. So what this means is this is only for an E1 device that has the cellular version. So when you would use this is if you don't want this device to be freely accessible for the users. So for this one, if you select triggered, you can only remote into the device if you send a text message to wake it up, essentially. And then you would put in the cell phone number that's associated with that device. In a lot of the cases that I've been seeing here, most people just leave it under permanent connection. And then you hit next. Now these are the custom fields that I had mentioned before. So I'll be changing this in the account settings to show you where to change it. But for my purposes, I have different labelings here for customer, location, and the lead engineer. Again, you can change that to either a company type, an assembly line number, whatever it is that you want at a quick glance when you open your E1 page. I don't really need to create this one, so I'm just going to cancel it. So that's a quick look on the E1's page. On the other side, if you have managerial access, you will be able to see the users page. Now on this, it's very similar to the previous page that we were on. This shows you all of the users that is tied to this admin account under this company. So you can see I have my own account over here. And what we've been mostly seeing when people create this kind of structure is that rather than creating a user account for each individual employee and each individual person, we have it kind of tied down to the task or what their position is. So if you have a maintenance guy, an operator, a lead engineer, it might be in your better interest to create a user account for that specific set instead of having this be populated with 500 other accounts. That being said, if you want to populate it with 500 accounts, you also can. So it follows the same thing. If you want to see what each person has been doing and things like that, you can pull up the logs. And in this one, it shows you the event and the user and when they have accessed it, similar to what you had seen before. One of the things to note is that it specifically tells you which device they had access to or they had created any changes. The only person that can add, create, delete any of these devices is admin. So everything else, it would just be a session was started or they did something. And just like before, you can export this as well. But this makes it a little bit easier. That way, whenever you want to perform any kind of maintenance function, you could just pull out the logs, look at it and see, all right, the operator made this change 2 weeks ago. Now we want to see what happened after that. Same thing applies to the properties. So for the properties, this is where, as an admin, you can kind of set your security detailing on the password protection. So if you want to create two-factor authentication, the roles, the managers, things like that, this is where you can change it. But more often than not, we usually just kind of keep everything the same in terms of permission and how you want to create your password securities. And it follows the same way if you want to add a new user as well. So the more important parts to the new user is the actual username. So if I say engineer A, they have like their own job functions. The only thing that is the most important here is the email. So if for whatever reason your engineer A forgets their password information and things like that, the email is where they will get their information and to be able to reset it. So this is the part where you actually have to remember it. And then you can create the password for them initially and then make it so that they can change their own passwords later down the line, whatever small details you want when you're setting up the account. And then lastly, we have our account settings. So it's kind of redundant. There's an account settings here and a general settings here. The one that you'll most likely look at is the account settings. Now, as an admin, I can pull up reports and log data and things like that if I want to on consumption. This one I don't really look at personally. And this is where I have my company information and general security policies. And from what I had mentioned earlier with the custom fields, so for how you want to structure your user interface, you can change these field names as you see fit. So if you have different locations, different devices, or if you want like machine name, things like that, you can also make it customizable to how is easier for you to function. For the most part, I don't really make a lot of changes under the account once I have this set up. So that's kind of a crash course on what you see when you go on eCatcher. So for the purposes of this demo, now we're going to remote into one of these E1 devices, specifically this one. And the whole point of it here is that I have an E1 device, let's say at a remote facility or a facility that is kind of limited in access right now. So it doesn't make sense for me to have to go over there just to toggle a couple of items on that PLC. So this is where the strength of the E1 devices come in and our eCatcher software. So eCatcher software essentially builds a Talk2M VPN tunnel to the E1 device. So I'm going to show you what our device looks like in a system right now. I'm sorry for the green image quality. The lighting doesn't look particularly great here. But as you can see here, we have an E1 device that is connected to a PLC, which is then running this HMI. Now, one of the ways that we want to kind of pretend that we are connecting to our PLC here is that I want to create a VPN tunnel to this device, flip a bit on this PLC, and turn this frown upside down. And that's kind of just going to show you how you can access your TIA portal remotely and things like that. So it's a pretty easy process on here. So back to eCatcher, I see that this is the device that I want to remote into. All I have to do is double click that, and eCatcher is going to run Talk2M. So Talk2M is E1's VPN tunnel and access point that will allow you to talk to your E1 devices that are registered under your company account. All right, so as you can see here, we have an active connection, and it shows that I am connected to my Cozy via on this IP address. It also shows you what devices are connected to that E1. So you can see here, I have a PLC with this IP address, and that actually corresponds to the PLC that we have physically connected to that LAN port. So if you have everything set up and things like that, you can see all of the devices that are on here. One thing to note, because I do have admin access, I can restrict certain devices that are connected to the units that I want to remote into. So if for whatever reason, I want my maintenance guy to be able to access the IP camera, but not the PLC, I can actually just click this and lock that PLC to make it so that they can not even see it on the system. All they'll see is the IP camera. So that's a little bit more on the added security on that part. So we are now connected to our E1 unit, which means by definition, our PLC is on our same network. So I should be able to pull up TIA portal and be able to change things on that PLC. So here we have the project loaded up. Because we are on that VPN tunnel, I should be able to turn this monitoring on and remote into that PLC that we have connected. I'm sure you guys kind of seen TIA portal over and over again throughout our little presentations here, but it's a pretty cool software. Okay, so kind of like what you had been seeing in the other presentations before, yellow means good, everything is green lighted, we are connected. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna describe it as I go along, is I'm going to flip a bit on this PLC, and then ideally, you're gonna see a change on this HMI. So you can see that face, he's a little upset, the weather's not great, let's turn him happy. So all I'm gonna do is modify that bit and change it to a happy face. And let's pull that back. He's a little washed out, but you can see that he's pretty happy now. So it's a pretty rudimentary explanation of what we just did, but it kind of ties on to the fact that if I want to make any changes to this PLC, I have full access to the TIA portal project. So if there's anything I need to do aside from flipping a bit, if I want to add another function block, if I want to do anything else, I can do that here, and it will change in real time without me having to be there. And all I would need is that Cozy device and that VPN tunnel. So in terms of kind of rounding it out, so I've already changed my PLC as I needed to. So everything's good, I think it's up and running, I'm happy with it. The next part is the actual disconnect. So we don't want to be running this PLC on my computer at all times, so I'm gonna disconnect onto it once I've made the changes that I want. So I can turn my monitoring off and go back to offline. As you can see here, there's no yellow, there's no green. Even if I make any changes here, that PLC that you saw on camera will remain unaffected. So now that we have that figured out, I am still connected to my E1 device. So for your purposes, if there's another device that you want to make changes to or have access to, by all means, keep it running. One thing to note though, is that if I am connected to this, no one else can, or I would get booted off if someone hops on. So there's really no point in keeping this connected when I'm done with it. So all I have to do is hit that disconnect. And this is where that message comes in for your logs. So if you want to say like, oh, I just ran a sample test on the PLC. This can be as detailed, as short as you want. You could just do a demo, you could do maintenance, you could do a software update, whatever it is that you changed. It's in your best interest to kind of track it for bookkeeping purposes. And then once I have that saved, it'll go into the logs for this device. And now that we've disconnected, you can see that there's no active connections, but the cozy unit is still online. So if I want to remote into that again, I'll do the same thing, just double click it, and then I'll be good to go on that part. So one of the quick things on here, I kind of just hopped right into the software, but the software is downloadable on HMS's website, and you can kind of just find that on ewan.biz. Now, as I understand how we're going along with this is that we will be sending all of the links to you on the chat or via email, but just as a quick, in case someone wanted to see it right now. So if you go on ewan.biz, all you have to go is go under the support tab. And when you scroll down to the quick links, you'll see an all downloads option. And again, the software that we were using is eCatcher, and it is right here. So that's about a good chunk of it. If you would like to join me in my breakout session, I'm going to be going over eBuddy and eCatcher and how you would use both of these software suites to actually set up your device right out of the box. So kind of like how I showed you on here, I already had a couple of devices set up on my eCatcher account. I'm going to be going over how these actually tie into the physical device, kind of like what you saw on camera.